the reason I'm part of this organization is Mark Steele, but I never knew I'd have to follow him in his comedy act someday. I'm going to tell you a little story to lead up to introducing Terri today. I think we share a lot. I was a naval officer in Vietnam. I was in the construction business. Can you hear me? All right.
Really close to the mic.
Can you hear me now? There we go. I was a naval officer in Vietnam. I was in the construction business. If any of you ever saw RMK, BRJ equipment moving around and building things, that's what we did. We had 53,000 employees, built 9 deep draft ports, 18 airfields, hundreds of clicks of highways. Well, there's Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines. We built it. But the job I did over there is nothing compared to what most of the guys here in the room did. And interestingly, not compared to my wife. My wife is a fellow Vietnam veteran. She was a captain in the Air Force. She was an airback nurse. And she flew the wounded out of Da Nang and Cam Ranh to the hospitals in Japan and Germany. And then when they'd been operated on, flew them back home. So she did something much more difficult than I did. And she wanted to be here today, but she couldn't get out of a previous obligation. I come to, and I want to share something with you. I come not regularly to these meetings, and at least a part of that is a feeling of awe and inadequacy when I walk in this room, because I think that you have contributed so much more to the legacy of our service in Vietnam than I have. It's not because of anything that I run into here. You're always warm and welcoming and expressing comradeship. So I want to pay some tribute to you, because our generation was called on to serve in an unpopular war. The men and women in this room did this in an exemplary manner. We all dealt with the fear and the anxiety and the loneliness that came with the serving in that war. But we came home and we built families and careers. And now we can reflect and enjoy this comradeship. In the Navy, when a person does something exemplary, there's a signal of recognition sent out. That's the signal BZ, or Bravo Zulu. And so I wanted to say to all of you, Bravo Zulu, brothers, Bravo Zulu. And we're coming up to the Red Cross. The reason we're here today, Terri and I have a piece of personal testimony. I was sitting in my office in Saigon on a Saturday morning, and I received a phone call from a lady in the United States, and she said, "My name is so-and-so, I'm with the Red Cross. Your father is in danger of dying, and you're authorized to come back home on emergency leave." You see, anybody in the military then and today that has a family emergency, the authorization for that emergency leave comes through the Red Cross. They are the ones that verify the family need. And so I was touched by that in my career. Now, a friend asked me to join the board of the Red Cross a couple of years ago. And it was interesting because the person that was the chairman at the time is a fellow named Kevin Keogh, who I actually had known in business years before. Kevin is a veteran. He is a West Point graduate. So there's all sort of connecting points that come into our lives. The Red Cross is the most incredible volunteer organization I've ever come across, and I serve on the boards of several, because you have volunteers responding to natural disasters for days or weeks and just disrupting their life to go help someone. And those people they help are complete strangers. That's the magic of it. It's not an affinity group like this or a church group or whatever. This is for the people in your community, and you don't know who it will be. With me today is Terri Badow Duckett. Terri is the CEO of the Atlanta Red Cross and the Georgia Red Cross. She's devoted her life and career to this institution. She's a leader locally, regionally, and nationally. She serves on boards that are almost too long to read here, but she's just so active, you know, the Metro Chamber of Commerce, the Junior League, the Georgia Chamber, the Atlanta Children's Shelter, Atlanta Speech School, Atlanta Women's, it goes on, Buckhead Christian Ministry, it just goes on a long way. She's a fantastic lady who has meant a great deal to Atlanta and to Georgia. I wanted to come tell you about the special relationship that exists between the military and the Red Cross. The Red Cross was founded on the battlefields of the Civil War and has maintained that relationship ever since. So please help me welcome Terri Badow Duckett.
I'm not quite as tall as George, so let's see how this works. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, thank you, George. It is such a pleasure to be with y'all today, and I had no idea you were so entertaining. I thought I need to hang out with these gentlemen and ladies a lot more often. I enjoyed the little prize giveaway that you had. It is really an honor for me to spend this luncheon with you today. And I thank George first for inviting me and for your leadership for graciously accepting that invitation. Thank you, George. I'm so grateful to George and all that he does with the Red Cross along with his wife, Dale. First off, I want to thank all of you for your service. I must confess, during the Vietnam War, I was a little girl. So my memories of it are pretty much what I saw on TV, with one exception. I was so proud to wear a bracelet that had a gentleman's name engraved on it who was missing in action. And I grew up in a small town in Michigan, and I remember getting the Detroit Free Press and every day looking through and seeing if I could find his name, whether or not he had been found, or otherwise. And I remember writing a letter to his parents just to say how proud I was of their son and for the service. So thank you again for the service that you made and the sacrifices you made for our country. I'm really impressed too with the partnership that y'all have with the USO. It's an incredible organization and a partner of ours, through your scholarship program and just through your example of patriotism. When people think about the Red Cross, they usually think what we call blood and flood. And when I think about it, I get that. Those are the most visible things that we do. As George mentioned, we're there when people lose their homes to either natural or man-made disasters. And every single year we respond with compassion and care to about 70,000 disasters. So let me say that again, 70,000 disasters every single year. But most people don't think about that because they think of the large-scale catastrophic disasters, but it's the home fires that we respond to, and on average that happens 8 times a day in the state of Georgia. And unfortunately, Georgia leads the way across the country for the number of disasters we respond to. We also provide about 40% of the nation's blood supply. And as I mentioned, those are really visible. But the reason I'm here today is to share with you a little bit of our program that we refer to as Services to the Armed Forces. It's our oldest chartered mission. And for folks that don't realize, we are chartered by Congress to do 2 things: respond in times of disaster and to serve the military. Since Service to the Armed Forces is kind of a mouthful to say, I'm going to refer to it as the acronym that we call it, and that's simply SAF. As George mentioned, SAF was born on the Civil War battlefield by our founder, Clara Barton. And for those of you who don't remember back to your history classes, Clara was one spunky lady. She was in her 60s when she founded the Red Cross, and she started with caring for wounded soldiers. And some of y'all might have had the opportunity to go to Andersonville. I was actually there last week. And it's really moving to think about the prisoners of war that were there and the work that Clara did to take care and to let loved ones know what happened to their family members. So Red Cross has continued Clara Barton's legacy of providing critical services with a caring touch to the men and women in all branches of the military and their families for more than 130 years. We're talking 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, and it doesn't matter if our nation's at war or at peace, here or around the globe. So, unlike those of you who may have experienced the Red Cross firsthand in Vietnam or back home as veterans, most people don't know the scope of our role. And worse, they don't even understand how they can help and be supportive in what we do. So as the CEO of Georgia's Red Cross, knowing that we have a state with one of the highest populations of both our active duty, Guard and Reserve, and veterans, it's really a challenge for us. And so I thank you for this opportunity to get the word out. Our Red Cross mission around services to the armed forces is more relevant today than ever before, and we need everybody's help to grow awareness and support for the vital Red Cross services we do statewide. An important part of knowing where you're going is knowing where you came from, and that's true for both individuals and organizations. So last year here in Atlanta, we celebrated our centennial, 100 years of Red Cross in Atlanta. This really important milestone gave us an opportunity to look back at all the incredibly caring people who made our work possible over the last 100 years. I can tell you that SAF is a huge part of that history, and our roots are really firmly planted in this core mission of ours. We have a history book that was written by a volunteer, and it kind of became our Bible, so to speak, as we went through our centennial celebration. She wrote in that, the welfare of our servicemen in Vietnam was uppermost in the minds of our volunteers and staff. It was our hope that all servicemen would know that those at home had not forgotten them. Lib Hunt, our volunteer who wrote that book in 1979, talked about the 36th evacuation hospital near Saigon, which was adopted by the Atlanta Red Cross. Red Crossers here and in Vietnam worked together to supply some of the comforts of home for patients. Every month, the field director would send a list of things that were needed, and our volunteers would go hard at work collecting them. Could be comic books, writing paper, tissue, tapes, playing cards, you name it. During that time, we also ran a Christmas project called Red Cross Voices from Home. It gave servicemen stationed in 25 countries and on 10 ships in sea tape messages and photos from their families back home. A distant cousin of that is our current Holiday Mail for Heroes, and that's a program that we do here locally, and our honorary chair is First Lady Deal. This past December, we distributed about 12,000 cards of thanks, of encouragement and holiday cheer to members of the armed forces and veterans here in Georgia. So then and now, the delivery of communication messages between service members and their families remains a mainstay of our program. Red Cross workers today actually deploy alongside the military personnel and are present in installations around the world. Through these installations and the network of our Red Cross chapters that we have stateside, we help families keep in touch concerning important life events like George shared that he had experienced. In fact, through our congressional charter, Red Cross is the only organization responsible for providing emergency family communications and other forms of emergency assistance to the U.S. military and their families. My guess is that some of you either were on the receiving or sending end of these messages while serving in Vietnam. During the years of American combat there, the Red Cross handled more than 2.1 million emergency communications. The field directors in Vietnam and the chapter staff back here in the States assisted an average of 28,000 servicemen each month with personal and family challenges. A favorite centennial project that we started last year to honor the Atlanta milestone was a partnership that we did with StoryCorps Atlanta, where they bring people together to share experiences and record that to have that legacy to share with future generations. One of the conversations included Donna Rowe, a former Army nurse who worked in a combat zone hospital in Vietnam. Donna had fond memories of the Red Cross staff at the hospital. "I meant it," she told us. "I couldn't have made it without those Red Cross girls." Donna shared the story of a soldier who came in to triage during a mass casualty incident. He had red hair, freckles, and blue eyes, and had just lost both his legs. "But I'm only 16, and my parents don't even know I'm here," he told her desperately. "I'll never forget it," she shared with us. "That's when I turned to one of the Red Cross girls and said, 'This young man needs to get a letter home.' I didn't have time to do that. I was trying to stop him from hemorrhaging to death." General William Westmoreland, commander of U.S. forces in Southeast Asia, summed up our role in Vietnam best. "The American Red Cross is a hotline to the folks back home, an oasis in the heat of a battle, and a comfort during hospitalization." There were 3 categories of Red Cross workers in Vietnam: the many men and women who served in the military hospitals, on hospital ships, and in medical facilities, where the seriously ill and wounded were sent before transport home. They provided a combination of social work and recreation therapy. There were the men and women who provided service on the military installations. They were the ones who helped arrange those compassionate emergency communication messages back and forth between families regarding births, deaths, and emergencies. And finally, there were the 100 of women who ran the Supplemental Recreational Activities Overseas program. And in the Red Cross, we affectionately refer to them as the Donut Dollies. At the request of, some of y'all encountered the Donut Dollies while you served. At the request of military authorities, Red Cross sent teams of young female college graduates to Vietnam beginning in 1965 to conduct light entertainment and engage in games and activities. They also served refreshments from traveling club mobiles. These women in their light blue uniforms operated 17 stationary Red Cross rec centers. They traveled by helicopter, truck, and jeep to boost morale and bring a touch of home to troops in the field. The Donut Dollies reached some 280,000 service members each month and logged more than 2 million miles over a 7-year period. And through it all, Red Cross workers shared in the hardships and danger of life in a war zone, and 5 gave their lives in Vietnam, while many others were injured. In the years that followed, Red Cross remained active in military operations from Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and 16 other international conflicts to Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. Is the organization that has served America's military families for the longest period of time. The Red Cross understands the unique challenges associated with military life. Here in Georgia, Red Cross volunteers and employees have a presence on 7 military installations, Army, Naval, and Air Force bases. And one of the biggest joys of my role is when I go to visit our installations. Just a week and a half ago, I was at Fort Stewart and Hunter Army Airfield, and I continue to be amazed and have so much respect for both the men and women that serve as well as their families for the sacrifices that they make. We provide family support and education opportunities to Dobbins Air Force Reserve and have a great partnership with the Georgia National Guard. We also provide staff and patient support to 6 VA and military health care centers across the state. Our Red Cross continuum of care begins on the first day of enlistment and continues beyond the service period with help for volunteers. We focus on 3 key areas. The first is providing those emergency services. We still to this day send those emergency communications, we help facilitate the emergency leave, and we provide access to the resource, including financial assistance. Last year in Georgia, we performed 18,800 emergency casework services for families, and of those, 6,800 were emergency messages. So here's just an example of that. Back in October of 2014, there was a fire at the Lenox Point Apartments, which is located in Warner Robins. It just so happens that an off-duty Red Cross volunteer was heading home from his job. He saw the flames and he stopped to alert the families to get out of their homes. He is a hero to us, and one of the families he saved was a military family. Airman Michael Vega, who is stationed at Robins Air Force Base, was on assignment in Korea at the time, but his wife and 2 young sons were at home. Following the fire, the Red Cross provided emergency food and shelter to the Vega family and assessed the needs of all the other displaced families. That's the disaster relief side of what the Red Cross does every single day. But we also sent that emergency communication message through his military commanders to let them know of the fire and to help coordinate Michael's trip back home to the state so he could be part of his family. That's our SAF part of the mission, and it all came together at once for this family. And by the way, when Michael got home, he couldn't wait to shake the hand of our Red Cross volunteer, and it was a really touching moment to see that family reunited again. Our second area of focus is support for military hospitals and VA healthcare facilities. So we provide rehabilitation therapy, morale building activities, and different assistance that's vital to comfort, healthcare, and recovery. So example, we serve the Wounded Warrior and Gold Star family programs. At Fort Benning, we provide adaptive exercise equipment, and at Fort Stewart, we provide a nutritional snack program. We participate in collaborative VA stand-down events that offer resources to homeless vets, and we conduct a volunteer pet therapy program at Eisenhower Medical Facility. We host a cards and conversation morale program for Atlanta VA vets, and we help escort veterans to visit the Community Referral and Resource Center at Fort McPherson. And our volunteers also do things like provide shuttle transportation, wheelchair services, book carts, and volunteers to support reception areas. Our third area of focus is building strong families and resilient communities. So this is where we work to strengthen a military family's capacity to cope. We do this through briefings, mental health, health and safety courses, job certification training, volunteer opportunities, and more. So since July, for example, we've participated in yellow ribbon events all over the state. You probably know those are the big welcome home celebrations that we do, and it helps the returning family members or the service members and their families reconnect and understand what are the resources available to them in the community. Last year here in Georgia, we gave deployment briefings for 40,000 people to introduce them to the Red Cross services in the event that something would happen while they were deployed. We also offer a summer youth program, host family activities, and host career training for military spouses. So I'll give you a little example. We have both at Fort Benning and Fort Stewart, we have these incredible volunteer programs where people of all ages come in and volunteer at the Army hospitals. And particularly for the young people, they come in and what it does is expose them to a health occupation trade. And it's amazing to hear their stories of they come in, volunteer through the Red Cross, and how they're making their career choices and going into medicine and other related fields based on their experience. We also at Fort Stewart do a great program where we take the spouses of members of the military and put them through a dental assistant program. They then have that certification that they can take to any installation around the world and work at the dental clinic that's on the base where their spouse is deployed at. And speaking with it was all women that were enrolled in that, it was really incredible to hear how it's very hard sometimes for them to finish their education because of their constant movement with their spouse. But also I think the biggest thing it gave them not only was the job training, but it gave them a small community and a network that they could turn to. And so that was just really a heartwarming thing to see. So these are all the things that we've had going on, but where is it that we're headed to? I can assure you that here in Georgia and across the country, we will continue to be there around the clock and around the globe, providing our humanitarian support for those who serve. Through the AmeriCorps program, we recently had the help of a veteran Army officer and former commander at Camp Eggers in Afghanistan. She helped to evaluate our Service to the Armed Forces program and identify new opportunities for us. And I've never forgotten what she shared. She said that you never leave a soldier in the field. He or she will either die or be captured, and the same is true for veterans. She said there's typically at least a 6-month window to help a new veteran who is struggling to reintegrate. After that, things go downhill fast. She said vets can die spiritually or emotionally. They can also be captured by drugs, alcohol, or depression. Along this line of thinking, there is a new resolve within our organization to increase resiliency in military communities and to strengthen our role as the leader in emergency support. We're exploring new ways of growing our reach through different service delivery models, and this includes expanding our community partnerships and recruiting even more volunteers and supporters to help. As of yesterday, February 2nd, we have a new senior vice president at our national headquarters in Washington, D.C. for services to the armed forces. His name is Kobe Langley, and he's a decorated Army veteran with a career of service to veterans and wounded warriors. Under his leadership, and in light of the veteran population that is exploding nationwide, we anticipate an expansion of Red Cross services for veterans. Here in Georgia, for example, we're going to relaunch our Reconnection Workshop. It trains our mental health providers, that we have licensed mental health providers that serve as volunteers, both for service to the armed forces as well as with our disaster clients, where they host small group sessions with military members and their families to help them integrate back into the community once they have served. The topics that they talk about include communication, dealing with stress and trauma, identifying depression, how they relate to their children and spouse, and working through anger. And this summer we'll be adding a new component to that will specifically work with the youngsters of those military members returning home. Locally, our vision includes expanding on the already firm foundation that we have of engaging young people at our military installations across the state. And we want to work at creating a youth institute that will work specifically to support the children of parents who are wounded or who have been killed in action. But we can't do this without help, and now we're exploring with partners and supporters who wants to be part of this service as we move forward. I'm really proud that our Red Cross mission is so deeply ingrained in service to the military community, and I'm really proud of the employees and volunteers that we have across the state. When I first started with the Red Cross, it was my first job, literally out of school. I started because it was a brand that I recognized. My parents said, you need to get a job or you need to move back home to Michigan. So I said, well, the Red Cross, what better place? Everybody's heard of it. Within the first year that I started, I have a cousin who was married to a man serving in the Navy. And he was on a frigate in the Persian Gulf, the USS Stark. And some of you may recall this. It was bombed. Her husband, by the grace of God, had decided to go to chapel. He was a devout Catholic. He was not where he was supposed to be. He was not with his shipmates who perished. And for some reason, Mike's life was spared. But my cousin was pregnant with their first child at that time. And upon hearing the news that his ship had been bombed and that there were many deaths, she went into premature labor. And she shared with me later, it was the Red Cross that contacted her to say that Mike is okay, and it was the Red Cross that contacted Mike to say, congratulations, you have a beautiful little girl. And so having that mission touch my family personally was the moment that I knew that I wanted to dedicate my career and my professional life to this amazing work that we do. So I invite all of you, you have served your country so bravely, and I invite you now, if you are looking for opportunities to give back to the community, to join with us as we move forward and create our own special force of volunteers to address the challenges that we're facing, as well as the wonderful opportunities that we have ahead of us in serving our active duty, Guard, Reserve, and veteran population. With folks like you who really know what's at stake, I know that we can make this happen. So I am happy to talk with anyone afterwards. You can always contact the Red Cross to learn more about what we do for services to the armed forces. You can go to redcross.org on the web, and there's a load of information there. I also want to share, because Red Cross, or George is too modest to share this, George serves on a national advisory group that we have at our national office that looks at our programs to the military. So not only locally do we have the benefit of his expertise and knowledge, but nationally the Red Cross does too. I thank you again for your service. I thank you for our time together today, and I hope that I'll see you again in the future. Thank you so much.
All right, we take some questions. Anyone have a question for Terri? Please raise your hand or stand up that I can
Yes, sir.
come to you.
I'm one of you, I guess, that's from Atlanta, and in 1966, I got a little tape recorder that you were talking about from my mother, my dad, and my youngest brother, and it was very thoughtful, so thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
All right, I do have a question for all of you guys. How many of you dated a donut dolly? Oh, good. Terri, we do have one volunteer that works with you and I. She actually was one of our members, our wife members back here. And Anna, I'll let you probably have something you wanted to ask her maybe.
Yeah, I'd like to get started with you again. I was in service to military hospitals. Started in Portsmouth, Virginia, and then I spent a year in Korea, a year in the Philippines, and a year at Tripler Army Hospital. They like to tease me that I was a donut dolly, but I wasn't. So, and I make it very clear that I wasn't. But I'd love to talk to you about doing some work again. I did a lot when I was growing up, and had all the water things, and then they didn't hire women. Isn't that funny? And that's how I got into service to military hospitals. They wouldn't let me into the other area.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. And yes, let's get in touch.
My name is Jim Hoogerwerf, and I just can't express enough how much I'm sure all of us appreciate what the Red Cross does. But one of my idea as we were talking was we only hear about funding when there's a disaster and, volunteer. And I know that you make a statement like we like cash is best, but how do you, how are you funded other than the volunteer or the donations that come in? Does the military fund part of your organization?
So we really exist on the generosity of the American public. Because we're chartered by Congress, a lot of folks feel that we receive a lot of money from the federal government. It's an unfunded mandate. Our services to the armed forces, there is a DoD grant that we receive, but I can tell you that it doesn't even begin to cover the services that we offer. We receive a really small, I mean, it's very limited dollars to support what we do here at Eisenhower and Fort Benning and Fort Stewart. But as we all know, as Georgians, we have a lot more installations in the state than just those 3. So it really is the generosity of people through individual gifts, corporate foundations, United Way support that we rely on.
My father passed away while I was in Vietnam. I was in Phu Bai, up in High Corps, and through the Red Cross's effort, I was home within 24 hours. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that.
All right, gentlemen, any other questions? Well, Terri, we are very, very pleased to have you here with us today. It's an honor to be part of all of us working together to help support the military and for what you do. Quite honestly, I knew they were involved in it, but I never knew the extent of what you guys do for the military. We want to thank you very much. And I do have a special gift for you today. Since you, now you'll be actually an honorary Vietnam veteran now. We actually have for you one of our Vietnam service medals. It's actually, you can use as a paperweight, or you can carry this through security and see if they catch it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you so, so much.